Welcome.
Доброго дня, шановні друзі.
Good afternoon, dear friends and colleagues. My name is Lvov, I'm coordinator of the community of Reuter. Together with UCMC today, we would like to start the practice of meetings of the, the government representatives who are responsible for Euro integration and MPs who are pushing through this agreement of association. Would like to start public discussion, discuss what our politicians managed to do, what they failed to do, and where they need our help. Our agenda consists of three parts. The first part, during the first part, we'll give the floor to the ambassador of the EU and the ambassador of the Netherlands and the counselor of the British embassy and Mr. Oleksandr Danylyuk. And the Minister of European Integration will report here. During the second part and the third part will be the panel. We'll ask deputies to tell us what they're doing along those lines. My name is Sokolenko, Taras Kachka, Lvov. Maybe you know all of us already because we both said that we are starting this format. In fact, we already tried to introduce this format for the navigator of reforms. I don't know about you, but I was impressed by two things: the quality of this navigator, and in a way its novelty. And I was no less impressed that this presentation was attended by the deputy ministers, real, not representatives of press service and MPs, and even the heads of the committees and subcommittees. And recalling the format of during the criminal government, the previous persons were not that accessible. Not always was nice to talk to them, especially we had nothing to talk with them. And since the previous experience was very successful, last time we had during the night hours, everybody was in time, and we were happy to see everybody there. Same here today. We also were very happy to see you today. Maybe we are not everybody has joined us so far, but they will join us later. So I wish you very interesting information to get, interesting questions, interesting answers, and maybe you can come up with your ideas addressed to our government people. So Trust, you have the floor. I'm the first here at the microphone, so I'm prepared to talk. May I sincerely welcome you. This kind of summertime, this kind of reporting period. Everybody reports. The Minister of Finance about money. We are going to talk about reforms. About a month ago, I joined the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and actually there are a lot of reforms, but it's clear that when there are many reforms, they have to be explained to each and everybody, both in Ukraine and the world over. And Ukraine is rather an open country, and in many respects its economy is integrated into the global economy. It is important that the success in reforms could be understood, but also beyond the boundaries of this country. That's why we are going to talk a lot about Eurooptimists, like formation within the parliament. So if we are talking about our MPs, Eurooptimists, we should not talk only how successful were the votings or the votes, but also how we could manage to convey the messages about our success to the world, outside world. So we would like to start our discussion with the ideas and the thoughts of the representatives of the Corps Diplomatique, especially about the successful reforms. First of all, Euro integration reforms. I would like to invite His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Netherlands in Ukraine, Mr. Kees Klompenhouwer, and the Deputy Head of Mission of the British Embassy in Ukraine, Mr. Martin Day, and I hope that we'll be joined by Mr. Tombinski, head of the EU Delegation to Ukraine, and Oleksandr Danylyuk, President's envoy to the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. So they are on their way here. And while they are still there, I would like to ask you, what's your idea about the half a year of this 2015, how dynamic, how successful it was as regards the reforms? Maybe can see some visible, maybe not so visible changes, transformations, to which extent you are satisfied with the pace of reforms, you as the representatives of the core diplomatic, Mr. Ambassador, sir, you have the floor.
It works, okay. Well, thank you very much, Taras, for your introduction, and thanks for the Media Center to have organized this. Thanks, Taras, for your nice words. I think this is a very topical discussion. I'm glad to engage with all of you. Since I'm from the Netherlands, I will speak like a Dutchman. That is, in our country we are rather straight, so we also believe that it is, if you're among friends, this is the best, policy to be straight. The question that was asked, whether there is reason still for optimism, I'll start with a joke. You know what an optimist is? An optimist is somebody who believes we believe in the best of all possible worlds. And a pessimist fears that this is true. So, I want to relativize this notion a bit. But yes, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I recognize that the people of Ukraine, particularly young people, have a dream to change the country, but also have the determination to change the country. And I feel that this spirit is still very much present today. And we also have to realize that changing a regime is much easier than changing a system. And that is today what you are facing, the challenge of changing also a system. And let me also start with the other positive note, and that is that I'm very impressed by various events, in particular also by the fact that the Verkhovna Rada is not stopping from working during the summer. It shows that there also the deputies are determined to continue the work which is essential, because if you want to change a system, the first thing you must do is to change the rules of the game. And then later on, you hope that the behavior will also change accordingly. But changing the rules of the game is very important, and I want to make a compliment to the Verkhovna Rada for, showing that it is serious about it. But at the same time, the businesses that I talk to, they ask me, tell me what has now changed. And they cannot give me an example themselves of what has changed, because in their day-to-day business, they still face, let's say, the old problems. And the financial situation is, of course, complicated. So there is a lot of pessimism in the business community. And I always tell them, well, obviously, time is required for those changes in the rules of the game to trickle down to, let's say, the practical level. But it's not so easy, because after changing the rules of the game, you have to change the institutions that apply the rules. And here is where the real difficult work is engaged, but has only been engaged. It is not halfway yet. So progress in changing the institutions in Ukraine, I should say, is still rather small. Yes, an anti-corruption bureau has been set up, but it will take certain time for this bureau to become operational, between 6 months and a year. We see some changes in other institutions, but sometimes I get the impression that these changes are rather cosmetic. People are being fired, and then things continue as before. So what is really being changing, And yes, the Ukrainian economy is in desperate need of reforms. And I believe that these reforms have to be implemented more speedily than today, much faster. And that the fact that there is a war going on in the East, yes, you hear a diplomat talking about war, is no excuse. And I would say there's also a price tag attached to not implementing these reforms in time. Because I believe also the people of Ukraine are impatient. They want to see progress. And there will be elections in October. And these elections, I think, are of crucial importance for the present government. And also, real, credible reforms are the only way to bring back foreign investment that Ukraine also desperately needs to go forward. And so what the country needs is leaders in institutional reform, leaders in changing the institutions. That's very difficult work. And sometimes, you know, it is accompanied by scandal, like what happened last week, I think it was, in the office of the Procuratura, where a safe was discovered with a lot of, let's say, banknotes and diamonds. And I hope that this is the beginning of the cleanup of this particular institution, and that it will also be continued. And if I understand the leaders of this change correctly, they could have not started this change without the active support of the journalists, the activists, and also the deputies in parliament. So here's the coalition that can implement the change. The leaders in the institutions, the journalists, and the deputies. So, this means if I see the movement starting, yes, I'm an optimist. But I'm an optimist in the knowledge that a lot of work has to be done. But don't be afraid, I would say, to cut out the rod at the head. We say in Dutch, you know, the fish start stinking at the head. So that's where you have to cut out the rod. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this moderate optimism, and I think that we share it among ourselves, and we understand how much we still have to do to implement in our reforms, but at least the general mood and general attitude is quite positive. Martin, you know, we travel with Martin in different times in different regions, and we saw how the society changed its attitude towards European Union. So how is the perspective from UK, from United Kingdom, the perspective or assessment of developments and reforms, and what can you add, or maybe to oppose Ambassador of the Netherlands?
Dobrý den, paní a pánové, děkuji komandě.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for the invitation sent to me.
In English. I agree with everything that the Dutch ambassador has said about reforms and the need reforms. So I won't repeat those words. But what I would say is that for the first time in Ukraine's modern history, you have a president, you have a government and a prime minister, you have a Verkhovna Rada, and you have civil society who all want change. I know you can argue that there are nuances, there are differences, but fundamentally, they all want change. And that is incredibly positive. That creates an opportunity. What I would also add is that, and the Dutch ambassador has already said this in many ways, change takes time. And that is why I think one of the most important things that all of the institutions that I have mentioned, the president, the government and the prime minister, the Rada, and it's fantastic that we have lots of MPs here today, but also civil society, set out a clear vision for change. And they, by setting out that clear vision for change, ordinary Ukrainians who voted in their hundreds of thousands and acted in their hundreds of thousands on Maidan, in Kiev and in other cities of this country, showing that they wanted change. Those ordinary citizens of Ukraine can see that there is a strategy, there is a goal. And then what is incredibly important is that they see progress, maybe only in small steps at the moment, but they see that there is progress towards implementing that change, and that there is, as we say in English, light at the end of the tunnel. That's why I think Silnici Razum's navigator is incredibly important, because it will show what change is happening. And if I also say, I think also the scorecards that the National Reform Council has drawn together are incredibly important, because they set out what the targets are, what the goals are, and then we can all see where there is progress and also where there is not progress. My final point is, and very much in agreement with the Dutch ambassador, that there has been some change. We need to see more change. And my very strong hope is that that change will come together and we will have a critical mass soon that will really make us all begin to feel that that change has really happened and that Ukraine is changing for the better. Because if you actually add up all of the new laws that the Rada have passed and all of the changes that have been implemented, there is some change. But my sense is that a lot of people don't feel it yet. I will leave it there. Thank you.
So thank you for this inspiring introductory words. I hope that you will hear a lot of more positive news from our deputy ministers and representatives of authorities who will replace you at the podium and will start immediately report about successes in reforms in the recent months. Thank you so much. Я тоді передаю слово Любі Акуленко, яка є
I give the floor to Lyubov Vakulenko, who is the powerful driver of the reforms and the most strict moderator. We have a lot of infographics where actually she puts special seals adopted or registered on those. So we hope that we will hear a lot of reports what the ministers and departments achieved along the lines of Euro integration or European reforms. Lyubov, you have the floor. The introductory speech. Together with the ministries, we are going to discuss today the sectoral reforms which are provided for by the association agreement. I would like to invite here to take part in the second part of our function Yaroslav Rutytska, who is Deputy Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food, on the issues of Euro integration, Oksana Reuter, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine, the Euro integration in Ukraine, Hanna Vronska, Deputy Minister of the Ecology and the European integration, Maria Nizhnik, State Commissioner on the Anti-Monopoly Committee of Ukraine, and also Mykhailo Bno-Ayriyan, Head of the Department of European Integration, the Minister of Energy and Coal Industry of Ukraine. Before giving the floor to our deputies of ministers, I would like to say a few things. In the last week, first of all, I would like to thank you for joining us here. You can ask me why only those ministries are represented here, because only those ministries are not afraid of talking about reforms and problems they face, and they agreed to join us here. This is number one. Number two, I would like to ask all the deputies of ministers to make use of the practice applied by the deputies. How many minutes you have? 1 or 2? We'll give you 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes at your disposal to tell what your minister does, to implement the provisions of the, let's say, association agreement. I can see that Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Jan Tombinski joined us, so you can prepare an extra chair for Mr. Ambassador to have a seat. So we have a kind of a chamber time discussion, so people can join us or leave us anytime at all, so you're most welcome. Good afternoon, thank you very much. I'm sorry that I've been late. I was delayed by a discussion, the reforms, the public administration reforms. since this is one of those elements which are absolutely required in order to implement reforms. But coming back to the topic, which is in the focus of attention, 6 months, what has been done over the last 6 months in Ukraine. I'm not going to enumerate or to name all the reforms or all the laws which have been adopted. I'm not going to talk about the measures and steps taken in order to go through this very complicated period. The Verkhovna Rada is in the focus of attention today because democracy means parliament, its procedures, laws, and responsibility of the people for the implementation, and the executive power which has to do all that as separate from the judicial branch. So we would be very much interested when independently of the association with the European Union, also we had some changes or the alterations, amendments introduced into the Constitution, because this basic document is badly needed and is required in order to outline or to write down what kind of authority or the powers are required for this or another section, different political functions for the judicial, let's say, executive and legislative branches, and how we can overcome those, let's say, impossibilities of putting the burden to the local, let's say, shoulders, so to say, how to go through this period which would allow us to a maximum extent simplify the delegation of the powers and the responsibility to the local structures. This is the element which is overlapped by other measures of modernization in Ukraine. The association agreement to us is kind of a roadmap of those changes and transformations which are required in order to bring Ukraine closer to the European Union. This is a list of reforms, but also this is a list of all the directions along which we are working. And maybe the most difficult and comprehensive, like the financial or judicial or let's say legal ones. And I do appreciate that we have some representatives of different ministries who are working along those lines. And those individual ministries which have made very important steps, the Minister of Agrarian Policy, Minister of Infrastructure, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Justice, they actually went through this period which were from the kind of short-term tactical thinking to a more long-term and strategic thinking, and took care of the documents which allowed them, enabled them to work within 3 or 5 years ahead of us and to reach some goals. Association with the European Union is not something short-term objective. This is the goal which is fixed in the documents which were drawn up 10 years ago, and the President of Ukraine mentioned that he was interested that in 5 years from now Ukraine would find itself in the situation when it would be able to apply for membership in the European Union. But today we need to take care of those reforms and prepare this achievement, and we cannot just declare those. We have to translate the reforms into life. As far as I can see today, the Ukrainian Parliament, Verkhovna Rada, the first function is legislative function, and also it has a control function. The Verkhovna Rada must add all those measures and steps, something like that. Also, they have to report what has been done. reforms can be committed to paper. The reforms can be adopted or approved, but then we have to see what was the reality of this implementation. So the second function of the Verkhovna Rada of the Parliament of Ukraine is the control over the executive power, the control over what has been done, which is absolutely required in order to demonstrate to everybody, to the Ukrainian people, the partners of Ukraine who help Ukraine today, what has been done, and to which extent, or how, to which extent Ukraine actually passed the no return point. In this specific Ukraine, they say that you cannot possibly do something which was implemented in other countries and which produced this effect. You know, the European Union provides assistance to Ukraine in all these spheres, in all directions, in the issues of expertise, different legal acts. And over the latest time, they signed the memorandum between the European Parliament and the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on the assistance rendered, I mean the technical expertise, how to improve the process, legislative processes. And we also can remember that we have, the Union provides the financial aid, and tomorrow the European Union is going to provide another financial tranche of financial aid to Ukraine. Maybe this will actually become the next element in order to help Ukraine to overcome or live through such a difficult period of time. But this assistance is not aimed. We actually this aimed in order to ensure confidence. This is the change of the reality, change of the way how Ukraine is going to change its future or build its future. We are talking about Ukraine, your future. That's why I do appreciate that we can discuss or talk about those issues in the presence of the representatives of different ministers, our colleagues. Administration has to help whatever is done by the parliament, the terms and conditions signed with the partners of Ukraine, that this also be instrumental for the change of the situation in Ukraine for the better. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador. Before I give the floor to our speakers, I would like to tell the journalists that indeed, for us activists to tell about the reforms, different reforms are very difficult. I can imagine how difficult it is to implement those. So I would like to turn the mic to a person who is working over one very important sphere because and every day. And what our health depends on how secure and safe is our environment. So I would like to give the floor to Hanna Rutytska for her to tell us what her ministry has done over the last half a year in order to ensure the safety of the food products. Vladyslava, you have the floor. Well, I understand that the ladies first, right? Perhaps you know that according to the navigator, it's Razom, more powerful together. I really appreciate our cooperation with leaders in implementation of all the Euro integration legislation, which is required in order to take care of implementation. And also in the screen, you can see quarter by quarter picture what has been done, what was submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers, to the Parliament, what was has been approved, what is still under our consideration. We will also update constantly on a regular basis our website information and provide information on mass media. I would like to your commission project to always support us in all our endeavors, and I also would like to thank all the assistance your integration procedures which have to be implemented by us regarding the safety and security of our food products. And Ms. Nevila, who is the leader, manager of a project. Talking about cooperation, our cooperation with Euro Commission, I would like to thank His Excellency Mr. Jan Tombinski. Over those 6 months, we developed a very detailed strategy for development of the agriculture, 2015-2020, in according to which we are going to represent now at the National Council reforms, also in the Cabinet of Ministers and the Agrarian Committee of the Verkhovna Rada. Everybody had the chance or the access to be get acquainted with this strategy. We'd like to thank everybody who actually took participate in that, and all our donors who provide their assistance and help. Speaking about those loans, you can see in the informed bulletin what we adopted now, Minister. Speaking about what we did in 2014, we submitted to the Verkhovna Rada, and those were adopted. I'm talking about the changes or alterations. Well, actually, everything is shown on the screen. The last was the loan, the fodder or forage. Today we are preparing with all the legal companies, all the associations. We are working in order to get prepared to implement the law, which is going to be put into force. And we would like to call everybody to support this and be involved in this very active work.
абсолютно вчасно. Мене
You stuck to your time exactly, and I have a question for you. Last week we saw a law on animals identification adopted last week. Why it is of importance for us to have every agricultural animal tagged? It may not be possible for us to track everything you do, but we do know of the legislation on the safety of fodder stuff. And we'd like to know your position about that, law number 2845. Okay, let me give you a brief overview of how the last week evolved. We were really nervous about two very important pieces of legislation included. The one was on quarantine and the other on certification. I myself sent hundreds of SMSs to MPs requesting them not to forget about these two pieces of legislation and why we need the certification, because our exporters may not be able to export their produce to EU markets. And we really want our exporters being present on the world markets as well. And if they are to comply to European and world standards, you will be able to cooperate with other companies and will be able to spread your produce all over the world. This concerns also our existing overseas markets and our intentions to go further internationally. Why it is necessary to have every animal tagged? Because it will show that we are capable to track every animal and to track safety of all of our agricultural animals. You know of EU standards in the area, and really it translates to our needs and our dreams of having healthy and safe products for everyone. Speaking of the legislative efforts, we had several drafts we worked on, and we really appreciate every assistance that we had from the European Commission. And we'd like to particularly thank Mr. Tombinski for his support of the process. Thank you. Do you have any questions from the audience? There is your time to. Nobody's eating Ukrainian food to react? Well, I'd like to add also that at times we do need professional lawyers and we do need professional doctors sometimes, but we need professionally made food much often than those. And this is a matter of importance and livelihood for everyone. Okay, thank you. On top of us eating, we also drink water and we breathe. it might sound ironic, but these are matters that can draw more attention to otherwise very dull topic and remote topic of European integration. And I'd like to give the floor now to Oleksandr Reuter. I know that you're a freshman on your position. Oh, sorry, you are Anna Vronska. I deeply apologize for this faux pas. Sorry, I give the floor to Ms. Anna Vronska. I don't know that you've been just 2 months in your position, but maybe you already can tell us what has been done by the Ministry of Agrarian Policy and Food, of Ecology and Natural Resources in the city. Thank you for this possibility. I would like to contest the first place given to the Ministry of Food, because we breathe definitely more times per day than we eat. And environment is nonetheless important as the food matters. According to Annex 30 to the Association Agreement, Ukraine has committed for implementing 29 directives and other legal acts of the European Union on environment protection. 26 of them have been specifically bestowed on the Ministry of Environment. For that purpose, we established a range of work groups. There are some cross-cutting topics we share with the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Transport, of Infrastructure. That is to say, we do work closely with other ministries as well, and we have some real progresses made so far. We've developed 4 draft legislations. 2 of them are of extreme importance. First concerns the strategic environmental impact assessment, and 2 of them are about public access to environmental information. This is what the EU requires from us, and it is also in line with the ESPO Convention, particularly concerning transborder dimension, and the Aarhus Convention and its related requirements. Both pieces of legislation were developed in line and with assistance from EU experts, and we'd like to specifically thank the European Union for their technical support in the elaboration of these pieces of legislation. We consulted line ministries to seek their comments on the EIA legislation was passed to the Parliament, and it has already passed line committees. We'd like to thank MPs for their support. We hope the legislation will be endorsed already this autumn, and it will surely affect implementation of other directives in environment protection area. We have also worked on implementation of the water code to change the system of water resource management, inland water bodies management in Ukraine, and we are going to establish a specific inland water body administration, much in line with what they have in Europe, to provide better chances of management of water resources in Ukraine. And we also designed a draft legislation on the protection of ozone layer to protect the air we breathe, to reduce air pollution. We also hope that we will circulate the document between line ministries within coming 2 weeks to seek their comments. And after that, we are going to send it to MPs to have this piece of legislation included in the parliamentary agenda. Thank you. This is to say that you've got 4 draft legislations. The EIA legislation, has it been through the first hearing already? No, it has just passed line committees in the parliament. And it was named as the basic legislation in the area. So, and I think it will bring some feedbacks from business circles because it will improve our breathing capacities, but it will have some bad rap probably among certain businesses. Well, let us not go ahead. Let's see how it comes in practice. Okay, then I can only hope and wish you that you will have your pieces of legislation adopted by the end of this year. Thank you, with hope and with support from the parliamentarians.
There is such a notion, the so-called ecological dumping. Are you prepared to fight this? In other words, when an investor comes and says he's going to give a huge amount of money, but he doesn't pay any attention to any ecological requirements. Specifically, this is the reason why we would like to start our implementation of the directives and draft laws about the ecological assessment on the environmental impact, because those laws made provision that we are going to assess the environmental impact at the very beginning of starting any kind of activity, either the international, domestic investor in the stage of planning. At the stage of planning, we'll have to receive what we call the environmental impact report. Only after that, before starting any activity, if you are talking about the series of laws, there is a list of the activities which is nationally important, which is not subject to assessment of environmental impact. But in case you mentioned when an investor plans any of his activities, in order to prevent avoid that when his activity can be detrimental to the environment, he has to go through the procedure of the environment impact reporting. Thank you very much for your explanation. For the zone of free trade, the Kronos system is very important. This is the infrastructure country. I fear that in the fall, the free trade system will start working. What about our highways or railroads? Will they be enough to bear all those loads? So I'd like to ask Oksana to tell us what her minister did in order to implement the association agreement. So please put President Oksana on the screen. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation extended to me to join here. I'm very frequently asked what is the transport from the point of view of the free trade. Very correct answer of yours. No economic cooperation, no exchange of ideas or experts or businesses can be without the free movement of those commodities, goods, and all the rest. You know, we have in the one of the section about the association agreement includes the section of transportation services, and I have to say that this is one of our priorities. Liberalization of carriage by all means of transportation between Ukraine and the EU member states. Today, liberalization of such transportations or the freight in by motor road or railroad is within the competence of member states. We usually have to be involved in negotiations with each country separately, and I believe the European Commission will help us to do that. I have a preliminary agreement on part of the European Commission that they are ready to help us during the negotiations during the last week when we meet within the framework of the Committee of Association. The matter is that each country, naturally, they try to protect their own market. And that's why today we have the same quotas regarding the transportation, and we have the kind of permissive system. With some countries, the situation is better for us, with others not so good, but we do hope that we will be able to resolve those outstanding issues through the dialogue with the member states of the European Union. What else? Next slide, please. What else we have to do? Liberalization of international transportation or carriage is a very important issue. Then another direction of our activities is uniting the unification transportation system. I'm talking about infrastructure. European countries are going to come here as well, so the highways must be the same. The internal inland, let's say, highways or waterways must be a component of European waterways. Why we need that? When a vehicle crosses the border, they deal with another legislation, other technical standards. This one will not be the case. If we want to be in the zone European of free trade, we have to provide the free movement of commodities and vehicles, and so we're trying to develop this specific direction. Our highways and railroads are included already in Trans-European Transportation Network. We are involved in negotiation about the inclusion of the waterways as well. Also, within the scope of our reform, we are going to further develop our waterways. We are working on new legislation, and if this new legislation will correspond to the European one. We are talking about the ports, we are talking about the navigation using the inland, let's say, waterways, ecology, personnel, whatever. This would be better for us because we are going to follow in the same direction, move in the same direction as the European countries do. Moreover, we have the river Danube. In the majority of the countries, Danube in the countries, so to say, are members of the EU. We are also the country where through the territory which Danube flows. So this is one of our priorities. Creating the equal terms and conditions for the access to the domestic market. We are talking about the internal, let's say, carriage and the work of our transporters inside this country. How to become, let's say, such a transporter. We know that this system is very much corrupted. Today we are talking about the motor car or motor vehicles, carriage and transportation. It's very difficult to ruin this system. We really don't want to ruin the system, but just to transform it and make it more attractive and more progressive. That's why. Okay, next slide. Maybe we can come back later. Well, actually, I want to ask you to tell us about what maybe we do not know completely, but we saw your presentation. What kind of legislative acts you provided? I'm going to switch over to this issue. I'm not going to talk in detail about all our directions of activities. So, motor transport, as far as I remember, it was number one in my presentation. Yep. Motor transport. We came up with the draft law to introduce amendments into 6 laws related to this or another extent to motor transport. Not only we are talking about the law on motor transport, the draft law is now on our website. You can acquaint yourself with that. It actually completely changed the whole system of the operation of transport in Ukraine. We start with the access to the market and licensing. Licensing today will be exclusively an economic requirement. The system of safety and security and transport is going to be changed. We are talking about the responsibility of the carrier, how he is going to organize the system in its enterprise. If the vehicles of this enterprise get in some complex situation on the road, nobody is going to inspect him. He continues to work. He himself, or this enterprise himself, will be responsible for safety of the operation. So there are a lot of commercial motor transport who can actually introduce any kind of the, let's say, technical maintenance stations or which would meet all the necessary requirements. So please, if you do that, please do that and work. So this kind of commercial component will be removed. A lot of questions regarding the motor transport law and motor transport. It's now being coordinated between different committees, and they have been submitted to the Minister of Justice. Well, first our deputies MPs were at raptures about this law, and I don't think we are going to have any difficulties when we submit in the fall of this year for the consideration of Verkhovna Rada. This is a very good draft law which includes The modification of this project actually include all the directives which we have in the motor transport section. All of them are there. What about the railroad? This is the next slide.
Авіаційний.
Aviation transport. We had a representative, a deputy head of mission of the British Embassy in Ukraine. We still have him here. Good. Then we'll have a special remark on the aviation. You do know of an agreement that was ratified way back in 2011. Not ratified, but prepared for the signing. Unfortunately, we cannot intervene into bilateral talks between the countries, but we do hope and we do expect that the two reputed and respectable European countries will not consider the signing of this agreement as an attempt to get into their business, but rather as a development of better chances of air freight and air passenger carriage. And our Deputy Prime Minister, our Minister, Mr. Pivovarsky, is now fully authorized to sign the agreement. I do hope that we'll sign it quite soon, because it is of interest not just to our carriers but also to our general public, to international carriers. And in spite of the agreement being still not signed, we've started already the work to implement aviation directives. We started that work in 2006, and we know of an addendum with aviation directives mentioned. We know that air transportation has been mentioned several times in the association agreement. I am hopeful that we will sign this agreement finally. Considering the great deal of directives we have to implement, we've implemented about 30% of them. I'm sorry, Ms. Alexandra, but as a moderator, I have to cut you short on that. I try to summarize. We are expecting to have this conflict between the UK and Spain to be finally resolved, to sign this open air agreement. You have a piece of legislation on railroad transport and maritime transport prepared, right? Speaking of the railroad legislation, we have a lot of discussions regarding the gauge and the size of the gauge and its difference. And also there is a great deal of questions regarding technical inspections of road vehicles, how we are going to deal with it. Coming back to railroad transport, I discussed the matter several times with some professionals from the EU DG on transport, and their response was that the gauge doesn't matter. We have various countries with various gauge sizes, like in Portugal, in the Baltic states, where they have it the same width as we have it here in Ukraine and elsewhere. So I think this is not the crux of the problem. Technical regulations, they can be unified, and ERA agency from the EU is working with Ukraine on that. I don't think we are going to have any problems with it. What about technical inspections of road vehicles? There is a relevant piece including that directive, and I'd like every one of you to reread it to quench all sorts of anxiety about that. Who's gonna be subjected to such inspections? There are specific regulations, say in 5 years for new vehicles, in other duration for used or aged. But there will be strict requirements as to those responsible for inspections, those companies authorized to deal with inspections, and those authorized to certify inspection results. particularly for technical safety reasons as regards commercial transportation and commercial road transportation. It's a bit another matter. I'm quite happy that EU has a very harmonized technical inspection system, but check our streets, you will see dilapidated bone shakers use as commercial trucks everywhere. Okay, thank you, Oleksandr. I do understand we'll Steve to brace up for more technical inspections, and we are ready to do it. I see that some of our speakers already running back to their offices, and we have to give them the responsibility. And before I give the floor to Ms. Maria Nizhnik, I'd like to first mention it that the Anti-Monopoly Commission is always in the focus of attention, because for a long time it has been considered as the top punishing authority for business environment. And only recently we see drastic changes with techniques and methodologies published by the Anti-Monopoly Committee and other materials publicized by this institution. So I'd like to know more. Is it really that extent of surprising changes that we face? Because normally Anti-Monopoly Committee is rather shy of showing the innards of their operations and their final decisions. So the changes are really interesting. As you're a newbie there, working there for just 3 weeks, I'm not sure if you're already in the know of all the changes in the committee, but maybe you already can share some information about certain moves in relation to the association agreement.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I do believe that we will be able to break old stereotypes that only criticism toward the anti-monopoly agency, because we really try to be open, transparent, to cooperate with business, with the society, or implement what is written in the association agreement. We started, and I believe we started rather well. As you mentioned already, specifically today during the meeting on Time Monopoly Committee, we approved the draft recommendation explanations regarding the methods of calculation of penalties regarding the subjects who related the legislation of economic competition or the law on the unfair competition. In fact, this is a duty which is directly described in the association agreement. This is also the prerequisite to obtain the financial aid in September this year. That's why we'd appreciate, well, you have to understand, this is only the draft explanation, so we would be thankful to the public and the experts if you provide your comments for us to take them into account when we are going to finalize this document, because this document is aimed at implementing all those principles which have been outlined and adopted in the European Community, legal principles, the principle of reasonability, the predictability, etc. So this document makes provision for such novelty, which we decided to propose in order to prevent monopolization of the markets. In other words, we propose the amnesty for the previous violations which took place previously. If the subject of economy, they already implemented concentration without the permission of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, we propose them to approach us with the request to do that, and we will undertake the commitment to apply the so-called symbolic sum of penalty, which in the draft document is as well, easily subjects address us, approach us within the first half a month. It will be 20,000 hryvnia. If after the half a year, the penalty will be 100,000 hryvnia. Now, publication or decisions, in fact, which you mentioned, in fact, this is a very important issue to me, because even before I joined the Anti-Monopoly Committee, together with the MPs and some of the representatives of ours, we tried to implement all those ideas in the draft law 2021, I believe, and unfortunately it hasn't been approved yet, adopted yet, but we hope it will be adopted soon. But without waiting for this to be adopted, we already published 3 decisions passed by the Anti-Monopoly Committee during its latest meeting. There is an issue of confidential information or access to information, and we do hope that this issue is going to be resolved at the level of legislative initiative. I have a big request to the companies, representatives of different companies. Please do not indicate all the information as the let's say the restricted information. In this case, all our decisions or our publications will remain as they are today. The company A received the permission from company B, and the company A was penalized for 100,000 hryvnia. So sorry to interrupt you because we have to hurry up. Do I understand properly that there is some methodic escalation penalties in other things and decisions that haven't been adopted yet, but you started to publish those and you already have come up with the methodology of calculation penalties? One more thing about the concentration, because this is a very important issue. This draft law must be adopted before the 20th of September this year. We do hope that this draft law will be adopted, and we seek your support in adopting that. As you mentioned before, as I mentioned before, we start to revisit the provisions of the law on concentration, which has to simplify the procedure of submitting documents and getting the permissions. And another issue of the assistance, which is very important, I would like to say that the Anti-Monopoly Committee is the body which exercises control, and we also come up with the drawing up of the regulatory acts in order to help the economic subjects. Thank you very much. We can see that in different ministries, if we collect and form a new map, we have a lot of tasks for September. Maybe we'll be able to concentrate and collect together the public and the ministries, and we are going to make a terrible life for the Verkhovna Rada. We're talking about the integration agreements which have to be adopted. Now I would like to give the floor to Mykhailo Bno-Ayriyan. You were very active in working with our working group on the European draft laws, and maybe you already, I know that you already achieved some successes. Can you share us with your success? Because in the times of economy, we could only dream about that. Thank you very much for inviting me here. At the dawn of my youth, I used to be a journalist, and I was always taught to explain everything using my fingers, my hands and gestures. So I'll try to use my gestures and to explain you what we've done and where we are moving. Ukraine is a kind of huge apartment building, it's very old, 40 plus years, and there are a lot of different departments in this country. One of those apartments is our ministry with a lot of rooms, a huge family. We for a long time we have not made any kind of repair there, but everybody lives the way they used to live. And somebody actually adjusted to that, and somebody tries to get access to the kitchen, others do something different. And now a new host comes, a new master, and has need to change something. Everybody understands that we need some changes to do some take care of the repair, but nobody dares to start. If you know the apartment repair, there's two ways. You can either to leave the apartment to take care of the big time repair, or to take it stage by stage, room by room, repair without leaving the apartment. So we actually we selected the second option and started to do some kind of big cleanup. What we understand under this big cleanup, our major strategy, which completely meets our requirements of our Euro integration course. We would like the rules of the game available today at the European market to be to a maximum extent applied in the European market. That's why our strategy and tactics, understanding there are a lot of interest in this house, in this building. There are many of those who would like to encroach on your territory, and somebody would like to live further on the way he used to live. So we try to use all the opportunities to avoid any kind of abuses. Those changes are very sophisticated or complicated, but you know that for the first time over a number of years, we changed the prices for the energy resources, first of all for the natural gas. This is going to create new opportunities and will lead to a competitiveness of the market. Together with the parliament, we adopted a number of different decisions, owing to which we managed to change the situation. For example, Ukrnafta. We are going to change the management. We hope, and thanks to the parliament, we managed to do so that in the companies, the pioneer in this sector, where the share of the state is more than 50%, and so that we could replace or change the manager, so that the manager represented also the interests of the state. Majority stakeholder. The same refers to the gas distribution network, etc. But this is cleanup. Parallel to cleanup, we are getting prepared for the overhaul, or the capital repair, if you will. And we have to understand what we have to change. In our understanding, the overhaul means the laws and the draft laws, the basic laws, which this is in a system way will change the operation of the markets, the market of natural gas. It was absolutely outlined together with the experts. It was successfully voted for. That was a real success. Now we are working on the secondary legislation. Any problems with the secondary legislation? There are a lot. Before October 1, we have to do a lot. The work is in progress. International experts help us out, and the energy community, and we have a very good synergy here. We went further on. We are working on the regulation of the gas recovery. And 2 weeks ago, we had a big time meeting in the Poltava region, and we declared that we would like to present to the public, together with the business association, the 10 steps to be taken in order to regulate the sector. This law will completely change the rules of the game. The law on the electric power market, it has been already drafted. I'm sorry for interrupting you because we're running out of time. The gas market, electric power, and number 3. Also, we have this such a system of things as transparency in the produce and recovery section. So you achieved quite good results, and by the end of the year we are going to have even better results. And we hope that by the end of this year, Ukraine will adopt the law on regulators. This is a fundamental law which will change the rules of the game and will harmonize with the rules with the European rules. Oligarchs are going to cry, I understand. Just give me another minute, I'm very close to the end of my story. Regarding this overhaul, we planned the overhaul, the capital repair, but to live normal life in this building, when you enter the corridor or your, let's say, the stairwell, you see that everything is better. We had the special, now we are talking about the condominium way, when all the residents of the apartments, they do together a very important thing. I am talking about Eurooptimists. I claim that I'm a Eurooptimist. Our team is absolutely consists of Eurooptimists. I would like the Eurooptimists who work in different departments, who reside in other flats and departments, do the same, do implement other reforms, and then we'll be able to change the whole building of ours. Maybe something this condominium committee, whatever. The representative of the UK embassy was very apt. We should not change the horses while crossing the waterway, And I would like the Eurooptimists have enough time and for them to be sure they can do that. Thank you a lot to everybody. I can say that we still remain Eurooptimists. I would like to wish you every success in your very hard work you are taking care of every day, and we are going to support you and help you in every possible way to change for the better of our country. Now I will give the floor to Elena Sikolenko, a journalist, and she will take care of the second portion of our part of our round table, or our Kulinka, she announced that the public will make the life of the MPs very difficult in the fall, but I propose not to wait till the fall of this year, but start immediately. So I would like to invite here to the stage. We have only the ladies in the panel. Oh yeah, we have one gentleman, but you said that you're not going to take part. Okay, you will. Good. Alexei, the Committee on the Energy, right? Okay. Alexei Rabshin, the Committee of Verkhovna Rada on the issues of the fuel and energy complex, nuclear safety, etc., etc. Svetlana Zalishchuk, the head of the subcommittee on European Euro-Atlantic integration, the Committee of VR in Foreign Affairs, Olena Sotnik, MP, the chairman of the subcommittee on European integration in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Victoria Ptashnik, the Economic Policy Committee of Verkhovna Rada, Olga Belkova, deputy of the head of Verkhovna Rada Committee on the fuel and energy complex, and we, in a minute, can start to make your life difficult, but the first question to this panel, to the participants of this panel, I will address my question to Svetlana Zalishchuk. She represents the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and we actually distributed the report, which lacks such a magical phrase, the association agreement with EU. This is not the focus of this committee, but Svetlana Zalishchuk can provide your assessment as a bystander, let's say, but very professional observer, to which extent the implementation and movement of the association agreement over the last half a year.
I'd rather call myself not an observer but a participant, because I'm also a member of the parliament. I am taking part in everyday lawmaking work on promotion of the needed legislations. And I'm a former participant of the Stronger Together campaign. That's why I will be wearing several hats today, and I'd like to start by thanking for the invitation to attend this event. And this is really how it has to be, with ministry representatives coming to report. Unfortunately, we still see it as an exemption rather than a rule. Well, nevertheless, it is good to have such event done on invitation of the civic society. Well, moreover, I would say that some of the invitees were actually self-promoted invitees because they expressed their desire to come here. Sure, it says about certain changes and approaches, and this should be seen also within the context of the association agreement implementation, because it is about the change of the whole paradigm of Ukrainian-EU relations. And there are 3 EU participants that have not started ratifying the agreement yet: Cyprus, Greece, and Euratom, for a variety of reasons. In one case, the document hasn't reached the European Council's directorate. This is about some slacks and improper information distribution. But on the other hand, we see that overall our Western partners work and act much faster in this. And I myself participated in negotiations with our Austrian representatives, and there was a threat of negotiations, and all relations have been stalled because there was a case of certain tax haven regulations imposed by the Verkhovna Rada that threatened some additional requirements on Austria, but this was thankfully solved, and we see very nice progress overall in our relationships with the EU member states. We see full understanding of the situation Ukraine is in and the crisis circumstances we are facing, and we feel the willingness to support Ukraine in its move. But I would also like to specifically agree with His Excellency Ambassador Tombinski by saying that everything depends ultimately upon Ukraine and on Ukraine. Thank you. But I would like to remind all the participants that we are really short on time, and we have the closing event in UCMC with the Minister of Energy and Coal Sector speaking. Maybe we'll wait for him to hear what he has to say. Now, you initiated and registered a draft legislation on inspections of all the executive authorities in terms of their compliance with the EU standards. Don't you think that it may stall further your integration activities? It looks rational for me, but don't you think it may put the whole process on hold? Well, we are not afraid of that, because I think this is a normal practice for each country, or each of the countries that have applied for membership and eventually became EU members. Take Poland, for example. They had to go through this phase, and they had a committee in the legislative body to act as a kind of filter, say, of the lawmaking process. Sorry, I don't see the infographics shown from our presentation. Yeah, we have it now. My first meeting today was very interesting per se, because we met with Patriarch Filaret, and he said very interesting thing. He said that since the time of Volodymyr, the Kiev Rus was looking at the direction of Europe, not at the direction of steppes and steppe tribes. That's a nice argument. We can see on the next slide that for these 6 months we had this much to review. That's quite a challenge and quite a big volume, but nevertheless we see nice results. Say 21 legal acts have been deemed not in compliance with EU standards, and mind you that these are most of these acts are those that were already endorsed. So it is about institutional capacities, which make one of the core problems today. When we talk to our EU colleagues about the role of our committee, when we explain them that we endorse these results in the parliamentary hall, but the committee has no right to veto this incompliant piece of legislation, it presents a problem, because we go back in the European integration process, and those who have been filtered by the committee, they are deemed compliant with the association agreement. During the recent meeting with the Minister of External Affairs, Mr. Klimkin, we expounded this topic and we reached a certain consensus. First of all, we described 3 key problems we have in the country. First of all, we have no Vice Prime Minister for European integration. As the key person of the executive, monitoring the whole range of EU integration issues. Secondly, with all respect to the Euro Integration Office, we still have no dedicated authority the way they had it in other candidate countries. That, on top of being responsible for collecting information, would also have certain authority to monitor activities of ministries, to monitor their progress on the way towards European integration. So if all these vectors converge into a form of a concept to be adopted by the parliament, by the public, then we will be better off by stating our Euro-optimism.
Next is Victoria Ptashnik, the head of the Committee on Economic Policy in Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. It's more perhaps difficult committee. Maybe one Victoria or 1.5 Victoria is working there, but we heard that quite good news from the Anti-Monopoly Committee. They're talking, that you're lobbying the changes and making transparent the work of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, and you already touched upon the issue, this issue. What is next? What about the laws we're trying to lobby? 2 minutes. First of all, I would like to say that over my half a year of work in the Verkhovna Rada, I clearly understand that the country is killed by 4 words. The words populism, PR, ratings, and preparations for the elections. And I believe that we need, what we lack now, we lack more professional discussions, we lack around cables, with a cameraman, without TV cameras, but this is very important. But it is with high interest that I followed how the representatives of the ministers presented their draft laws, and I would like to draw attention of the reps of those ministries that it is very important to convey the idea of their draft laws with the involvement of the professional society or community to convey this message to the people. I mean, who knows what would be the destiny of this or another draft law in the parliament. It's very difficult to foresee, it's very difficult to register, it is very difficult to adopt that in the first reading. If we do not have the professional discussion or just singing the hymn of Ukraine, the glory to Ukraine, by this we can kill any kind of the law, draft law. I came to the parliament in order to change the entire monopoly committee as an institution and force this institution to work openly and transparently, because I believe in order to develop economy in Ukraine, it's enough just to have the normal and sound competition. And it is enough, it's sufficient to have this competition, not to create the artificial barriers on the way of development of some of the markets. So I believe in this constitution. I would like to know about the changes. 3 draft laws. Okay, the first one was at the beginning of the cadence about the publication of the decision of the Anti-Monopoly Committee. So the destiny of this draft law, it was adopted in the first reading. Then there were attempts to block it by some remarks or comments in our committee, Anti-Monopoly Committee. So of the adoption with the previous manager of the Anti-Monopoly Committee, the adoption of this draft law was impossible, because they clearly said that we cannot publish the decision since we do not have the complete number of the personnel, and there will be nobody to revisit those decisions. And the fact that what I heard today, the news that the Anti-Monopoly Committee is going to reduce this practice, I was really happy to hear that news. And now this draft law is prepared for the second reading. By all means, we are going to adopt that. So we do hope that the policy of the Anti-Monopoly Committee will not change after the change of management. We have to introduce those amendments in the level of the law. If you're talking about the penalty sanctions, We've been talking a lot about that, and we have raised this issue many times. I believe that even the Monopoly Committee will publish their methodology, but again, this has to be the regulatorily fixed document. For this document to be binding to all, and I do believe they are not going to change their games of the rules of the game. And another draft law, the demand of the IMF to increase the threshold. When you reach this level, you have to apply for concentration. This draft law is so much badly needed. I mean, since 2008, both OSCE and the other international organizations were talking that we have very low indicators. In case of adoption of this draft law, this will mean a real deregulation, where nobody can affect the competitiveness on the market. They will they will eliminate the barriers in their ways, and they hope that with such promotion and professional discussion. Thank you very much. I promise that we are going to change our places. I mean the succession of the parts of our discussion. I would like to Olga Belякova, Alexei Ravchin to answer such a question. Olena and Victoria as well said that it's not enough to adopt the draft law in the second or the first and second read and then sing a hymn of Ukraine, but there are very important law on the natural law, on the transparency of recovery of the production of the they were adopted. Who else, Akhmetov or anybody else, they start to open the information under those law and when it has to happen. We have just 2 minutes at our disposal. But I believe that you put everything upside down. As far as I understand, Mr. Demchyshin is going to talk after us. Let us concentrate on our work and report to our work. It's my pleasure to be here. This is my second cadence, and maybe the first time in my life I feel a special pride for the work which we managed to implement in the Energy Committee. I'll allow myself to start with this is why we are doing that, because I believe it's very important for the society and NGOs and journalists to understand the final goal, ultimate objective in all the reforms in the energy sector, irrespective of the energy area which is used or consumed, is one, creation of the transparent markets of the energy sources. That means that everybody, all the players in this market, in a very transparent and competitive manner, must in the most efficient way involve in investments and new technologies to work and without the existence of the natural monopolies. We started to do that during the previous cadence, which allowed us to attract the investments in the gas transportation system, which took place in 2014. Then we were talking about the energy society, which it's something which allows us to change the management not in other state-run companies. This demonopolizes demonopolizes the market. It allows other traders to enter the market and will stimulate the real market prices, which will in its turn influence the tariffs. We made a great step towards cleaning of Naftogaz of indebtedness. There was a big hole in our economy, and I hope that we'll see next year the improvement in the budget, and the citizens will pay less for those intransparent schemes of financing which existed before. It's my pleasure to speak that Ukraine is a progressive country, and together with the traditional sources of energy, which for a long time are going to remain the major ones, we also start to stimulate alternative sources of energy. We adopted that law in the first and second reading, and President already signed that law. This is a very important law, but Alexei will tell more about that. It's my pleasure to talk about that maybe for the first time ever in the Ukrainian society, in a very intransparent sector, oil and gas sector I'm talking about, in certain industries. There is a big consensus between business, legislative power and executive power, to the fact that it's high time to open all the information about all the budgetary payments, EITI initiative so-called. Also, I would like to thank the civil society, all the MPs, all the heads and managers of the ministries who were involved in this work. When everything is clear to everybody, everybody is ready to support this. Olga, I'm sorry, they say that the ministry has already arrived. So 2 minutes to Oleksandr's eruption and we're going to wrap up. We are going to use our right with political pressure on our respected minister. May I remind you, now I would like to concentrate our attention what we have to do. This is very important. Myself and other deputies, we are working along those lines for Ukraine to get the real energy independence of Russia. That means that in Ukraine we are going to create a regime which would stimulate the Ukrainian producer to generate energy. We are talking about the necessary to change the fiscal regime for gas extraction industry, and I'm sure that in September we'll do that. Ukraine today remains on the border as compared to the European Union. How they operate, both the ministries and the companies, what they do with the earth's bowel, so to say. There are some problems with transparency of the issues of the permissions, etc. And I would like to address the deputy minister and the acting deputy minister that you have to have the roadmap, and we'll lend you our hand. We are prepared to cooperate with you 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Oleksandr eruption, 2 minutes. Oleksandr eruption, Verkhovna. As Natalia said, I did not. Well, Marina Golub invited me, but even if they never invited me, I would come here anyway. As member of this coordinator and Eurooptimist, and we have here 4 Eurooptimists and Eurooptimist ladies. I mean, one Euro integrator symbolic that represent here the party Batkivshina, where the leader is the only leader is the lady. And here we have beautiful ladies next to me. And the same was very interesting when we had the ministers here. I came to the policy for 3 things. The first, to give an opportunity to the people behind me to the use of the best the Ukrainian foreign education. They are afraid to come to the politics. To increase the trust to the power. When they do not trust to the freshly elected, and when the soldiers do not trust their generals, this is awful for the country. And number 3 is to increase ground-collar jobs, energy efficiency, renewable energy. This is why I came to the politics. Speaking about those goals, the work in the committees and reforms which we took care of in the committees, you can see that during the previous panel, this panel, we were talking about the reforms in the energy sector. Even those who are not involved in the energy sector, they are involved in diplomatic activities and coming, traveling all over different countries. They're talking about what we've done. They take special pride of what we've done already. This is positive. In the gas market, we had a very efficient work with ministries, with our foreign colleagues, and the energy society, and we were with all gas exposures of the law which you mentioned, and the law on the alternative energy, when we depoliticized this sector, which we kind of say SAPRA profits. And we have to develop the green energy. The same applies to ecology. We considered our committee, and unanimously we voted for this draft law. And ecology is in friendly relations with the energy sector, but we had a negative experience with our cooperation with the ministry. The committee is like a filter. A few words about the regulator. We'd like to pass a law on regulator which would be a transparent one of the best. National Committee on the Energy Problem, let's say whatever. But here we have a negative experience of our communication during our latest meeting of committee. The draft law was rejected by the VR. Those are not non-European laws. We would like to, Mr. Demchyshin, he hears us, to increase the quality of the work. We have good professionals. A few words about the prospects. The fact that we increase the tariffs, we can talk about whether they're justified or not, but we cannot increase the tariffs at the same time not to provide the people with the possibility to consume less. We have to increase our independence from the Russian gas, but we have to decrease the consumption of those. And we have a lot of things which we can do here. And I would like to crown my speech with what we started, the law on the civil service. We would like to use to go not to the private business, but to the state bodies and apply their talents there. I know Skrbina, she's working on this draft law now, and I hope that this draft law will be adopted in the fall of this year. But in my own experience, I wanted to see how open this competition is. And actually, my Facebook page, announced the vacancy. And today I talked to several people. There was a girl who 1 year after the graduation from the university, short record she has, she said, I don't know whether I will be given this post or the office or not, but the fact that she wishes to try herself and her capabilities, she said that this makes an optimist regarding Ukraine. So we are Euro-optimists, and we are optimistic about our cooperation with the ministries and our coalition. I'm sure everything will be good in our country. And in conclusion, I would like to say that in the picture we posted this kind of a short photo report of this meeting. I said that we are Euro-optimists, and he said we are also Euro-realists, Euro-integrators. Thank you, and I promise next day we have a different succession of different parts of our round table, and there will be opportunity for the journalists to ask you questions. Thank you. United.